Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again for part 2 of the Murder Mystery Advent Calendar. I'm not going to go over the first 6 days because my videos are long enough as they are. Just go and watch part 1 if you're interested in it. And sorry if I look terrible, but I'm at home sick with what appears to be food poisoning, even though it was our Christmas do last night and all the food I ate, other people ate. So I don't know why I am ill, but anyway, here we are, and it's already happened. I'm 2 days behind on the advent calendar. The foster cat is on my lap looking after me whilst I'm poorly. So I've just read day 7, but before I get into that, I realized a couple of things when I was editing the part 1 video. First of all, you might remember one of the puzzles led to a statement which was something along the lines of every alibi has a flaw, and I realized that nobody has been talking about alibis at all. There's been no mention of them. We've purely had motives. We've not had means or opportunity or alibi or anything else. And maybe that's because we're still at the beginning of the story and sort of everybody's being introduced. But we're a quarter of the way in, and Ezra, our apparent investigator, hasn't asked anyone, where were you when Lily died, or anything even vaguely along those lines, which means that puzzle, like quite a few of the other puzzles, they're kind of giving a vibe to the murder mystery, but they're not actually providing you with genuine information to help you solve it. Which leads me on to another point, which is I don't think you need to solve any of these puzzle things, even though it's obviously marketed as, how do they describe it? An interactive Christmas escape room novel with 24 daily puzzles and riddles for mystery lovers. So I kind of wonder why the puzzles are there. Maybe as we go along, they'll be more integral to the actual mystery. But at the moment, they're just giving vibes. And they're not telling you anything that you don't learn from the actual story. And maybe that's deliberate because they want people to still be able to solve the mystery even if they struggled with the puzzles or had to skip a day or something like that. I mean, I've made a puzzle game when I worked in an escape room. And I'm not sure I would make the puzzles so redundant if I was doing this book. Because if people struggle, that's what the hints are for, you know? And personally, I'd find it more satisfying if they were integral to the story, but then I understand that, like, you've got to market these things for different levels of experience and puzzle skills and all that. Anyway, third thing that I thought about as I was editing, basically going over my own work, but third thing was I really wish there was a diagram or a picture of the layout of the train. There have been little hints so far that the train renovations are important in terms of like removing doors and adding doors and changing the nature of rooms, and that will be significant. But I don't have much of a mental idea of the layout of the train at the moment. I guess if we went back to chapter 2, where the guests are being walked through the train, you might be able to figure out what order the carriages are in. But yeah, I really wish there was a diagram to help with that, particularly as in the last 2 days we've found there was an extra carriage that's not mentioned on day 2 at all because it's an orangery, and that's the exclusive use of Penelope Rothschild and Agatha Rutherford. Because, you know, if you pay £30,000 for a train ticket, you're not actually allowed in all of the carriages. How silly. I just feel like that's a classic of a murder mystery, is a floor plan of the house or the train or whatever set, or the village, whatever setting you're in order to figure things out and timelines and such. You're generally provided with a map or a diagram. Maybe that was beyond the AI designer's capabilities. So anyway, on to day 7. In it, Ezra learns that the night of Lily's death, Lily and Agatha had a big argument. Agatha found out about Lily's plans to go off and do her own thing and write her own novel and her financial backing for Penelope. And she basically accused Lily of being really ungrateful and a bit of a snake and, you know, betrayer of Agatha's teaching time and effort to like nurture her talent and all of that. So anyway, they had a big argument and Lily stormed off, and Agatha says that's the last time she ever saw Lily alive. and is, broken up, that's how the relationship ended, and that's what the parting words were. Then in the next scene, back in the lounge car, Agatha presents the next clue in their fictional murder mystery, and basically this fictional murder mystery is starting to mirror the real life situation even more than it already was, because in the fictional one, Lord Pemberton has an argument with his protege, and the protege says he wants to strike off on his own and leave the mentorship, and they had an argument, and that's how the relationship ended. So, and everybody reacts shocked about that, and they're seeing the parallels, and they seem to interpret it as Agatha putting herself forward as the potential murderer of Lord Pemberton. Guess she's playing the character of his protege. It's never said that, but based on what's written here, that seems to be what's going on. But then Imogen, who I'm suspicious of, she steps forward and kind of reframes the situation. She says we shouldn't be considering Agatha a suspect because she is using her art to process her grief, basically, and her emotions. And that's really brave and vulnerable, and it's an artistic catharsis, and everyone should support her, basically. Then Ezra talks with Linus, the conductor, about what Agatha told him about their argument. Linus reveals that Agatha's left an important element out of her semi-confession, and that when Lily's body was found, yes, she was alone, but all around her were the pages of her manuscript kind of blowing in the wind. Final scene is at night time. Ezra hears like a metal scraping noise. He opens the door of his compartment and looks out and sees Sebastian, who's completely abandoned the fictional murder mystery and his character and everything, and he's starting to get a bit more desperate, and he, in this scene, is trying to break into Agatha's study. He's using lockpicks. That's the sound that Ezra hears. He's interrupted, though, by Linus stepping out of a storage closet, saying to him, Mr. Blackwood, I think you're lost. And then they sort of eye each other up, and Sebastian leaves after sort of a cold stare down between these two men. Right, and then the puzzle for the day is actually a riddle, but it's this kind of thing which makes me think, this puzzle is not important to solving the murder mystery. This is just for vibes. This was written on the bookmark that Lily was using in her last days, and so it's just in amongst her personal effects. Okay, the riddle is, I am born from silence, but I die when spoken. I have no lock, yet I can be broken. I have no weight, but can be at a terrible cost. What am I? So let's move on to day 8, which is called Death Comes Calling. Do we think Agatha is about to die? All right, day 8 completed. And I was wrong about who's death. I kind of thought it would be Agatha because in one of the earlier puzzles, there was some line like the secret dies with Agatha, or so. I thought that was a hint for what was coming up further on in the story. But never mind. No, it's not Agatha, it's Sebastian. So the day starts off with Ezra and Vivian just catching up with each other about what they've discovered, what Ezra has discovered, really. He tells her about Sebastian trying to break into Agatha's office. And Vivian believes that Sebastian's kind of abandoned all subtlety, and it is a physical object that he's trying to find, and that was maybe exchanged in the stockyard in Vienna last time the train ran. Then the fictional murder mystery game carries on with them all gathering in the library, and it's set up to be like gloomy and mysterious, and there's an armchair in the middle of the room, and Agatha reveals the next clue in the game, in that there's actually been a second murder. Strangely, she starts off the scene by saying, welcome to the final shocking climax of the Pemberton mystery. And this is only day 8 of their trip. This murder mystery game is meant to last all 24 days. So that kind of makes me think maybe Sebastian's disappearance later in the chapter is meant to be part of the fictional game. I haven't quite figured out what's going on with the fictional game because it's kind of in and out. Anyway, she says that in the Pemberton mystery, it turns out that the killer had killed someone else not just Lord Pemberton. And the evidence that she presents to them is the killer's diary, where it goes into detail about killing a business associate, poisoning a business associate who threatened to expose the original crime of killing Lord Pemberton. And she reads out the diary, and the clues in the diary, although we're not given it, but basically it very much points to Sebastian's character. Then Sebastian, who up until for the last couple of days, up until this point, has not been very in character. He's been focusing on the Lily Montclair death, not the Pemberton death. Anyway, he snaps back into character as this investigator, and he puts on the performance of a lifetime, saying that he was framed and it's all lies. And then as he's trying to defend himself, he starts choking, and he says something like, "Oh, the brandy that we had as a celebratory drink this morning." And then he collapses in the chair that was in the middle of the library car. According to the rules of the game, anybody who's murdered throughout it has to lie still for an hour so that all the other characters can examine the crime scene. So he's lying there, and everybody's like rummaging in his pockets and looking at for evidence. They find a receipt for a cafe in Vienna, and then Agatha kind of directs them towards like looking at the brandy decanter and the ice bucket and other bits and pieces, and they find more clues to the fictional murder mystery game. Then they go back to the library car, and Sebastian is not there anymore. They intended to go back and like congratulate him on such a great performance now that the hour was up, but when they get there, he's not there anymore. A note gets delivered to Agatha by one of the stewards, and it says, "My dearest Agatha, a brilliant final act. My part is done, and the lure of the Austrian countryside is too strong. I've decided to slip away for a walk at our next stop. See you all at dinner. Yours, Sebastian." And this causes raised eyebrows between like Ezra and Vivian and Penelope, because they all agree that Sebastian is not the type of guy to go for a countryside walk, and that's really suspicious. So they've all got their spidey senses peaked up. Whilst they're stopped for 20 minutes at the Austrian village, Ezra goes into Sebastian's room and kind of rummages around looking for anything. He finds Sebastian's outdoor like hiking shoes in there, and he's like, well, he is not the kind of guy to go for a countryside walk without his hiking shoes. He wouldn't wear his like normal dinner shoes out. That's even more suspicious. And as is the way, he finds Sebastian's notebook, because everybody in this story keeps a notebook full of their secrets. In it, he finds notes that Sebastian has been making about his own investigation, and that he is kind of watching Ezra and the others following along with what they're doing and using their finds to inform his own investigation. Things around like Hazel finding the photos of Sebastian and Lily when they were children, and then he made a note about how like Ezra had found Lily's notebook, that kind of thing, just jotting notes. So he's been watching everyone. Yes, he has. And then that's pretty much how the chapter ends. Oh, actually, no, it ends with the final line in the notebook, because everyone writes down their internal thoughts. "Tonight, I can't wait any longer." And so Ezra is believing that Sebastian was on the brink of a breakthrough, and he was going to do something tonight, and now he's disappeared. Dum dum dum. Oh, it's all very tense, isn't it, fluffy boy? So, onto the puzzle for the day. It's a Vignere cipher. I don't actually know if that's how you pronounce that word, but I pronounce it Vignere. I didn't have to figure this out. The text says that because, you'd have to, because at first glance it would look just like another Caesar cipher, but it's not. Anyway, Vignere ciphers need a key to be decoded. It's a keyword. Ezra believes... Hello. Thanks. Cuddle time. Yeah, this cipher text was apparently found in Sebastian's notebook, and Ezra believes that the keyword needed to decode it was in Sebastian's performance. Personally, if I were making this puzzle, I would have made the keyword either brandy or diary. But it's not either of those. I've been on the decoding website and I've tried a few different words. Oh no, sorry, this wasn't in his diary. It was in it was like a card that was left in the library car beside the murder scene. So actually it was left in a copy of Hamlet, so let's try Hamlet as a keyword. Nope, it's not that. This is another puzzle that I've had to take the text from the error correction PDF, just if you're following along. I will put it up on screen, so if you want to have a go at decoding it, pause this video. Or you know, keep playing, because I've got to figure it out myself. So yeah, I've tried words like, what did I try? Secret, promise, lie, poison, brandy, diary. Sebastian didn't actually say many words that are recorded here during his like big dramatic scene. It's a lie, he declared. A fabrication designed to frame me. I haven't tried frame. Nope. Because most of the text is just describing what he's doing. He delivered a final passionate monologue, weaving together threads of clues from the past week, protesting his innocence, accusing another player of planting the diary. His speech reached its crescendo. He stopped. His eyes widened. He brought a hand to his chest, and that's when he starts dying. The brandy. This morning, a celebratory toast. And that's the last thing he says. Let's just check what Ezra thinks. He suspects the key is hidden in the context of the performance itself. Maybe we could add library. It's in the library car. Ah, got it. The ghost is real. The trophy is the proof. Okay, interesting. We've not had a ghost or a trophy. Unless maybe Lily won some literary prizes when she was, before she was Agatha's apprentice, and sort of the lead up to that. So maybe there's a trophy from that. Okay, well, I'm caught up, so let's move on to day 9, which is today's day. Okay, day 9. I am really hungry and feeling rubbish. Anyway, it's called One Player Down, and the text reveals that the ghost is Sebastian. That's what they're referring to. Although Ezra himself is also referred to as a ghost. So the day starts off with Ezra confronting Agatha and saying Sebastian's missing. Look at all this proof. He left behind his boots, he left behind his passport and his wallet. And she brushes him off and says Sebastian was a dramatic person and he's probably just met up with a friend and gone off somewhere in Austria, basically just fobbing him off. And then she really kind of sticks the knife in by saying, she brings up Ezra's past about how he got that big investigation completely wrong, and says, oh, are you trying to find like a real life mystery to solve and redeem yourself? And you know, you were wrong before, you could be wrong again. And everyone on the train watching this is kind of agreeing a bit, saying like, oh, he's got a history of seeing problems where there are none, and you know, conspiracies and that kind of thing. So he's feeling very hurt that they would doubt him like this. And he even talks to Vivian, and she kind of is a bit on their side, saying, you know, you were wrong before, you could be wrong again, essentially. So he's feeling very ganged up on and disappointed, and you know, that Vivian wouldn't back him up and that kind of thing. So he goes to the observation car to brood for a bit, and he meets up with Hazel, the influencer, who is now like his does all his digital digging for him, and you know, looks through articles and financial records and all this kind of quite deep dive. So she's been looking into Sebastian, what could have happened to him, and she says there's been no financial transactions on his cards in the last 9 days since he got on the train, which like she shouldn't have access to those kind of records, but we'll kind of skim over it. She says that his agent has been trying to contact Sebastian, hasn't been able to. There's been no social media posts and that kind of stuff. So she is more on Ezra's side about like something dodgy is going on. Meanwhile, the fictional murder mystery is carrying on. Agatha is distracting from Sebastian's absence by, this doesn't fully make sense, but in the fictional murder mystery, he has left a suicide note, and the note says he confesses to the murder of Lord Pemberton, declares his undying love for someone, and announces his intention to slip away from this mortal coil. It doesn't make sense, because in the previous day, his character was murdered by someone else, and they all watched him die in the library car. You know, within the fictional world, his body should have still been there when they all came back. So the fact that she's trying to explain Sebastian's absence by having that character come back to life and then commit suicide, it doesn't make sense. Imogen Fairfax is she's playing the peacemaker and being like, oh, it's so clever of Agatha to weave Sebastian's disappearance from the train into the fictional murder mystery. I don't know, that's incredibly suspicious to me, because if they're pretending that he's just gone off with a mate, why are they changing the story that at least is a bit pre-written to try and distract people from his absence? Why aren't they just like, I mean, sticking to the story about like, yeah, his character died, so the man himself isn't like needed to take part in the story anymore, so he's left the train. That would be a much better excuse. If his character died, so he's had enough of us and has left. Very strange. Anyway, that's where Agatha and the others are kind of playing along with that nonsense. Ezra's not having it, of course, so he goes back to Sebastian's compartment, does some more rummaging around in his suitcase, and finds a ring binder, which would originally have held a script, but includes lots of printouts of background information and all the passengers, and Hazel's research, and like the original articles from when Lily's death was reported. Basically, rather than just little notes in a notebook, this is his more thorough background research into the investigation. Again, it's kind of like going over motives and who the prime suspects are, just, you know, for the reader, refreshing our minds. He does have Penelope listed as a suspect, with her motive being obsession, deeper than it appears. I hadn't really considered Penelope a suspect. She had her financial controls over Lily, so yes, Lily was trying to break free from Agatha, but she wasn't trying to break free from Penelope that we know of. He's also listed Agatha as a suspect with motive control, Alistair Kingsley with his motive of fear, what did he really see that night, and Dashiell as his motive with pure jealousy. Just that. Then within this ring binder of evidence, there's a page which it looks like a very important photo was stuck down on and has been ripped off. So there's some kind of very important proof. And over that square, Sebastian has scribbled, "Where is the locket?" in capital letters. Ezra had a search around the binder and the suitcase and everything, and there's no locket and no photo. So Ezra believes that he essentially is inheriting this investigation from Sebastian. And now he is looking for this physical piece of proof. Then the puzzle for the day, interestingly, it's another coded series of letters. Another one that you have to go to the PDF to get the correct puzzle. But weirdly, the text that goes with the cipher text doesn't mention what kind of cipher it is. There's no H equals A or Et2 or mention a Vignere cipher. So I'm just like, should we consider this another Vignere cipher? And it doesn't feel the need to repeat itself. It's not saying what it is because it's the same as last time, essentially. In which case, so I've pulled up the Vignere cipher decoding website, put in a couple of keywords like locket and Lily, and maybe I should try Sebastian. No, I haven't got it yet, so now's your chance. Could, of course, not be a Vignere cipher at all, but it's also not giving us any indication of what it is. Maybe I'll try photo. So I have tried the Caesar cipher as well, just worth a try, and it's not that. None of the shift numbers work. Might have to look at the hints file for an actual genuine hint this time, not just fixing an error. It's just weird that it doesn't even give you a clue as to what kind of cipher. His credibility shattered, Ezra searches for truth that cannot be dismissed as paranoia. He returns to Sebastian's room and finds a small, leather-bound notebook used for rehearsing lines. Tucked into the back sleeve is a single sheet of paper, covered in a strange coded message. Okay, let's go for a hint. At least just tell me what cipher to use. Go to the correction file. Yeah. This is a simple substitution cipher, where each letter of the alphabet is being consistently replaced by another. There's no complex key to find. A good detective knows that some letters appear more often than others. This is where it's annoying that they didn't give any clue as to what cipher to use, because even if they'd included the word substitution in the text that goes with it, I sort of feel if you're going to do a substitution cipher and not tell people that's what it is, you shouldn't use Latin characters. You should use symbols or letters from a different written alphabet, like, Cyrillic or kanji or something. Although that would probably lead people to try and translate it. So yeah, symbols and characters, or emojis or something that isn't the same as what you've been using the whole other way through the book for different ciphers that you do actually need letters for. Okay, I don't have a pencil. I'm just going to do it on my notes app. This is me just being picky because I used to work in an escape room and I did make puzzles occasionally. So yeah, when doing substitution cipher, if you've not got anything to start you off with, then you just have to guess it. Like, so there's a G all by itself, so that's probably A. And then MN by themselves, well, it's not going to be an, so it might be in. But then N would be N. In, on. If there was three together, oh, there is three together, so that might be the. There's something on a something, or in a something. So is there any other X's? I was hoping that second word would lock it. So the first word could be like his or her. No, it wouldn't be her, it would be his. It's such a short phrase, there's not actually much repetition. It's weird, if I'm right, that the first letter is the. Good chance of it. It's weird there's no other X's in the sentence, considering E is the most common letter in the English language. I'm now thinking MN is probably not in or on, because I mean, these puzzles aren't made the best, but would they really leave N as N? So instead of in or on, I'm going to try is. That doesn't hugely help me because there's no other N's in the ciphertext. So I've got the, and then the next word starts with A. I thought it might be Agatha. Not enough letters in between A and T. D does appear twice. The end of the second word and the end of the last word, but none of the short words give me any clues about that. So the something is a something. Oh, I'm so hungry. What did the rest of that hint say? Because I only read the first bit about being a substitution cipher. Right. Good detective knows that some letters appear more often than others. Start by identifying the most frequently used symbols in the message. It's not symbols, it's letters. They most certainly represent the most common letters in the English language, like E, T, or A. Look for single letter words and common 2 or 3 letter patterns. Good luck. Yeah, I've already done all of that. It's funny because the only letter I can confidently say is the G is A. All the rest, yeah, you're using an educated guess, but it's still a guess. Could be author. Just thinking back to the first puzzle where Sebastian was just referred to as the actor. Just trying to think, not many of the others have been referred to by their job title rather than their actual name. So does that match up with any of the other letters? So there's no other W. K. If K is O, no other K. If D was R, the last letter ends in D. Yeah, the author is a liar. Well, yeah, Agatha's been lying her pants off. Dashiell, of course, being the other author. And Imogen, would you count her as an author? Is she an author? Is she actually published? Imogen Fairfax, a devoted fan, an eager, starstruck, and somewhat nervous aspiring writer. Would you count that as a writer? Or am I just carrying on with my Imogen theory without much evidence? My theory being that she's Agatha's current protege. And that's why she's in Lily's office as her room. Why she always rushes to defend Agatha. I don't know if it was a thing that Agatha would always have a protege. Maybe it's not. Anyway, that's the end of day 9. I am finally going to go and have something to eat at 3:44 p.m. This sweet little snowcat has been with me the whole day. You're just the sweetest little baby. My little nursemaid. Alrighty, here we are, day 10. And it's called Whispers in the Dark. Interesting title, considering what happens in it. What does happen? Dashiell is being a complete bitch, basically. All the passengers gathered for a morning parlour game that Agatha put forward, where she said it was a writer's exercise about creating a detective persona. So you give them a name, a backstory, and a fatal flaw. And Dashiell's character that he created was called Inspector Doyle, and just basically completely discredits Ezra and uses his troubled background as the background for his detective character, and says that this inspector is, once celebrated and then messed up publicly, accusing an innocent man, and is now a shell of his former self, a man haunted by his own fallibility. And he's now desperate to prove he's still brilliant. He's so desperate that he constructs elaborate, fantastical theories, and in the end he becomes a tragic figure, unable to distinguish between real life and shadows of his own broken mind. Which of course makes the whole parlour game quite awkward. and leaves Ezra completely humiliated and downhearted and everything. It's completely fair. Sorry, cat's going to interrupt. Hello, baby boy. What are you doing? What are you doing, baby? After that semi-public humiliation, Ezra goes to the observation car where Penelope creeps up on him, and she gives him a satellite phone, saying that it's a direct line to any information that he wants. If he wants financial records, if he wants company records, if he wants, communication records, he just needs to pick up the phone and someone at the other end will provide what he needs. What a convenient plot device. A magic phone. Can you get your butt down, please? This whole incident actually, although you could write it off as Dashiell still being like the bitter rival, the fact that he's going so hard in to discredit Ezra and make it seem like he's completely overreacting to Sebastian's absence makes me think that Dashiell and Agatha are maybe in cahoots, and actually they're working together and not rivals, but he's there to be the character of a rival. And that would make sense, since they're both established, respected authors in the same genre. Yes, different styles. She's more into golden age mystery, and he's into he's based on Dashiell Hammett, isn't he? I know anything about him, but his name at least. And the gritty noir crime noir, and with the gumshoe detective and all that. But what are they up to if they are working together? I mean, Dashiell definitely respected Agatha enough at one point to suggest that they co-mentor Lily together. Then there's a scene where Imogen tries to sympathise with Ezra, and she brings him tea and a snack in the lounge car and says that what Dashiell did was, cruel, and she feels sorry for him, but she also, at the same time, is also trying to lead him away from investigating Sebastian's absence, and says, it seems to her like Ezra is carrying around a great weight and is under a lot of stress, and maybe he should eat his pastry and chill out, basically, and stop chasing shadows. So everyone is trying to convince him that a missing passenger is all perfectly fine and rational, and Sebastian's fine. He's just gone off with a friend or something like that. And then it's the evening and, the nighttime, and Ezra hears more strange noises. It's stretching it a bit because, like I said, I don't have a schematic of the train, but he has to pass through several carriages to get to the luggage car at the end where the noise is coming from. And finally, he starts thinking about Alistair Kingsley and about how suspicious his behaviour has been and some of the strange inconsistencies. And then he sees Alistair trying to break into a old iron-banded wooden steamer trunk. He's using a crowbar trying to break a lock off it, and that's what the noise is that Ezra heard. But no one else heard that. Well, so far. Even though it must have been quite noisy. So anyway, we get to the end, and it's time for the puzzle. So this is a note that was crumpled up in Sebastian's coat when Ezra was going through the pockets. It's a different type of code encryption. It says, "This isn't a classic code. There's no discernible frequency or pattern." He pictures a writer at a desk, his fingers resting on the computer keyboard, and has an epiphany. Key to the message isn't in the alphabet, it's about the layout of the tool used to write it. So, this seems like it's not going to be very complicated. So originally, when I was first looking at this, before I pulled a keyboard up, I thought maybe it was moving your fingers up from each letter to the letter above would be the decryption. But I'm now doubting that because the keys aren't, they're not directly one on top of the other. They're all slightly kind of shifted diagonally. And also the first word contains an R, which is the top row, so that can't shift upwards unless it were to loop back round. But now I'm just going to look at my next idea, God, covered in cat fluff, is to go sideways. So that should remove the problem of Haney being on the top line. Okay, so V becomes C. J is H. E is, no, R is E. C, H, E, C, K. This is going to be the T. Check the T, R, U. Oh, the trunk? Yeah, check the trunk. Oh. Wait. That would imply that Alistair Kingsley also has seen this note, and that's why he's trying to break into a trunk. Interesting. Could that be why Alistair was acting so strange? Is he also another one investigating Lily's death? He hasn't openly discredited Ezra's concerns about Sebastian, so maybe he's also concerned but not being so vocal about it. We'll find out tomorrow. Oh, let me pop this on so I can see you. So, day 11, the rival's revenge. I'm actually not at my own house. I'm house sitting just for one night, which is my favourite kind of house sitting gig because I don't need to cart around lots of clothes and foods with me. But I did bring my book, of course. So let's have a look at day 11. Okay, finished day 11. It doesn't quite make sense, but I'll explain myself. So, plot-wise, Ezra and Dashiell are in the bar car at the beginning of the day. Dashiell's very pleased with himself for winding Ezra up. Ezra is very hurt. They're in the same car, but they're not drinking together. And then Dashiell's has to go and answer a telephone call in the communications car because they're not allowed to have their cell phones. As he goes to answer the call, he leaves behind, and this is part number one thing that doesn't make sense, but obviously had to happen for a lot of reasons, but he leaves behind his very expensive, very important leather manuscript folder where he's been working on his latest book. I don't think any professional writer would leave behind their work, even if it's in a private dining car, bar car, whatever. That intellectual property is too valuable for someone who's their only job is writing mystery novels. Like, you wouldn't leave it, you'd take it with you, wouldn't you? Am I insane? Is he insane? Is this writer not making sense? Anyway, Ezra goes over and looks at the manuscript, and it turns out that Dashiell is writing a fictionalized version of what's going on the train. So he's writing about the Alpine Express. It's a gilded cage on walls, a rolling asylum for the wealthy and the bored. And there's an aging Empress of Mystery, Dame Astrid, and various passengers, including a man named Dolan, a disgraced journalist haunted by the ghosts of his past failures, blah, 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 now going paranoid. Now, Ezra is thinking that maybe Dashiell isn't just recording a fictionalized version of what's going on for them. He's actually orchestrated the whole thing, and he's the mastermind, and he's written down his entire evil plan in a murder mystery style book. In which case, if he thought that, why is Ezra not stealing it and reading the whole book, and then he'll figure out how it all happened? But no, he doesn't do that. The question was terrifyingly simple. Was Dashiell Sinclair merely writing the story, or was he directing it? Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, then Ezra goes back to his room and he uses the satellite phone that Penelope gave him to call her, because I was mistaken, it doesn't call a helpline, it calls her. Anyway, he asks her to look into Dashiell's financial activity, which she does, and it turns out that Dashiell is heavily in debt to loan sharks because of a gambling problem. And then they think that because Dashiell and Agatha are kind of professional rivals, I think I remember they write quite different types of mystery books, but anyway, they're professional rivals. And so they think that Dashiell is causing problems on the train, like getting rid of Sebastian and causing scandal, so that Agatha will be disgraced and her whole niche of this 24-day murder mystery adventure will fall into ruin again, and she will be disgraced and dropped by her publisher, and then because she's no longer in the picture, he will be the rising star. And it's like, well, if we can't publish Agatha's books, we'll publish Dashiell's. Thing number two that doesn't make sense to me, really, because writers aren't just like pieces you can swap in and out. If somebody's buying Agatha's book, that doesn't automatically mean that they would buy Dashiell's book, particularly as they've talked about being quite different styles. That Agatha's is a classic murder mystery and Dashiell's is much more like psychological, dark story. They're not interchangeable in the industry. That's what they think Dashiell is trying to achieve anyway, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. Ezra went back over Sebastian's notes, and there was an interview with one of Lily's old classmates mentioning again that interaction between Dashiell and Lily, where he asked her to be his protege and she turned him down. But it added the extra element of Lily seems to have thought that Dashiell was very like intense and predatory, and she was quite scared and creeped out by him. So she turned him down professionally, but she was spooked inside, and he was saying weird things. But these are weird things that he's admitted to saying to her, that he started talking about her latent darkness, her understanding of the human abyss, because that's his style. But like I say, he's already said that that's what he saw in her. Then the final scene is Ezra goes to Vivian, his agent's compartment, and he presents all these days' findings to her. So then she says, oh, it's almost a perfect case, almost too perfect. There's only one problem, his alibi. This is thing number 3 that doesn't make sense in this chapter. So according to Vivian, Dashiell's alibi is that when Sebastian was giving his final performance in the library, apparently Dashiell and Agatha were in the dining car. But this doesn't make sense because Sebastian's performance was not a monologue. He was responding to Agatha. She had read out the fake diary entry accusing his character of murder, and so he was responding to that, defending himself and saying that no, he was set up, and then that's when he collapsed from being poisoned. So Agatha wasn't in the dining car, she was in the library. Vivian says of Dashiell, he was in the dining car, having a loud, very public and very drunken argument with Agatha. The sommelier had to intervene. At least 4 other passengers who were still finishing a late lunch and 2 stewards can place him there for the entire hour. He never left their sight. The passengers weren't in the dining car either. They were in the library playing the murder mystery game. That's what they're all there for. I don't remember anything about that scene, specifically Dashiell being there. I will go back and check. But this supposed alibi that Vivian is presenting is not at all convincing to me. It just seems factually incorrect. We know where Agatha was. So anyway, they have a discussion about the alibi, and then Imogen Fairfax just happens to be walking past the cabin door, overhears them and says, I couldn't help but overhear you're talking about alibis. It's so fascinating. She says, in the best mystery novels I've read, the true mastermind is never the one who actually gets their hands dirty. Someone as well connected as Mr. Sinclair, couldn't he have just hired someone? Then she talks about how someone could have got on for the 20 minutes that the train was stopped in Austria. They could have killed or abducted Sebastian and then got off again. Imogen smiled, clearly pleased to have contributed. Just a thought, she says cheerfully with a little wave as she continued down the corridor. So yes, that's a bit bonkers behaviour from her again. And even Vivian thinks at this time, because she says, okay, Ezra, I was wrong to doubt you. You're not paranoid. Something is happening on this train. It's real. I don't know if she actually suspects Imogen or she just means generally things are weird. I'm just going to go back and try and find the library scene. This is where we could do with a train layout diagram. Is the dining car right next to the library car? Okay, so rereading that scene. Yes, Sebastian responds to Agatha's accusations. He has this big collapse in the chair. Then I guess the hour they're referring to is the 1 hour that anybody murdered has to stay still so that others can investigate. Then they start gathering around his slumped form and they begin their investigation, going through his pockets. They continued for 10 minutes. It's then that Agatha made a strategic intervention, saying a final thought. The killer's diary mentioned a celebratory toast. Perhaps the final clue is not on the body, but with the brandy decanter. So at that point, she's still there talking to them. Then all the passengers abandoned the body and swarmed towards the bar cart at the other end of the library. For the next hour, the passengers were absorbed in frantic scavenger hunt. Well, I believe our hour is up. Let's congratulate our leading man on a performance that had us all fooled. Okay, well, it's implied that Agatha stayed with the detectives, either in the library or the bar car. I guess she could have gone somewhere else whilst they were looking around and then come back to the library. But it's not the strongest timeline. And Dashiell's not mentioned at all as whether he's there or not. It's not recorded. Okay, anyway, so the puzzle for the day. So this is an excerpt from a book that Dashiell has written. It says, in an attempt to show off his intellectual superiority, he's made a critical mistake. He's written a crime scene that is logically impossible. Can you find the flaw in this excerpt? Obviously, I will put it on the screen. The body of the Count was discovered at dawn in the train's refrigerated meat locker, a room kept at constant -10 degrees Celsius. The heavy door was bolted from the inside. The sole cause of death was a puddle of water on the floor and a single, nearly invisible puncture wound on the victim's neck. My brilliant detective, Inspector Graves, deduced the truth instantly. The killer, he explained, had fashioned a razor-sharp dagger from a large icicle, stabbed the Count, bolted the door from the inside, and then simply waited for the murder weapon to melt into an untraceable puddle, leaving behind a perfect, impossible crime. I think we can all figure out what the logical flaw is. The murder weapon wouldn't melt in a -10 degrees Celsius environment. But also I love the line, the killer fashioned a dagger from a large icicle, stabbed the Count, bolted the door from the inside, and then waited. What, so the killer waited inside the refrigerator with the murder victim? 2 logical flaws in that statement. Tomorrow's is called The Patron's Secret. Check that out tomorrow. Oh, day 12. Looking and feeling a bit rough after not a very good sleep last night. But let's get on with this because I have a new possible prime suspect, but I will fill you in on the story, which I've already read, so you can follow my thinking and see if you agree. So, day 12, The Patron's Secret. So the day starts off with Penelope and Ezra meeting up again because Penelope apparently has a security team keeping an eye on her 24/7, and so she asked them to look at the camera footage that they have from the time that the train was stopped in the little Austrian village. And then so on camera they caught Dashiell getting out of the train, meeting up with someone very shady looking, and handing over an envelope. So there was some kind of exchange. So these two, Penelope and Ezra, are clearly thinking this is the hired hitman. Personally, I think it's more likely to do with his gambling debts. I think that's red herring, and he was paying a deposit on his debts or something like that, because the loan sharks are following him even when he's on the train. Then next scene is the more important scene for the day, I think, because it is Ezra finally confronting Alistair Kingsley about all the strange things that he's been doing. Because what was it, 2 days ago he was breaking into a trunk? Yeah, day 10. Ezra was watching him trying to crowbar his way into a trunk, and then the day just ended there. No confrontation, no waiting to see if Alistair actually got into the trunk and what it contained. Just nothing. So Ezra confronts Alistair in the lounge car, kind of sits down opposite him and says, "The jig is up. I know something's going on with you. Just tell me the truth." And he mentions having seen Alistair in the baggage car trying to break into the trunk. He's like, "Just tell me the truth, maybe I can help you." Alistair briefly tries to hold it together, but crumbles pretty quickly and confesses what's been going on. and it all comes out pretty quickly. So there's kind of two elements. The first is that the family shipping business is not doing well financially just because of bad investments and the changing market and all that. And so Alistair himself has committed insurance fraud. He lied about the cargo of some of his ships and then said that those were lost in a storm, so then he got an insurance payout. He is using the refounding of the train experience as a way to launder the money. He's co-founded the revival with Agatha, so that's where the money came from, and at the end of the experience he should get it back, you know, laundered, clean, and he can try and salvage the business. And then the second element is actually more to do with the history of his family business, because it wasn't founded by him, it was founded by his grandfather, who used it as a cover for smuggling. So he says, you know, antiquities, illegal liquor during Prohibition, art, whatever could be sold for a price. And he admits all this because Ezra is confronting him about the trunk, and it turns out that the trunk contains all of Alistair's grandfather's notebooks. So like, even though this was a very illegal activity, he kept very accurate ledgers and recorded everything, and all of those ledgers are in the trunk. And this is where the story starts to fall apart a little bit for me. So the reason the trunk is on the train is because Alistair says the trunk was supposed to have been shipped from our estate to a maritime museum in Hamburg, but I arranged for it to be loaded onto the train for this trip instead. I thought I could get into it during the journey, find what I needed, and no one be any the wiser. And that's all fine, makes sense, kind of. I mean, like, why is he donating it to a maritime museum? But the part that doesn't make sense for me is that, yes, the trunk's on board the train now, but it was also on board the train 5 years ago. And Lily broke into the trunk, picked the lock, found the ledgers, brought them to Alistair, saying this is like amazing historical artifacts. She was really excited about it. She considered it part of the train's secret history. I'm not entirely sure, really, the connection between the train 5 years ago and Alistair's company, because, as we've already seen, the carriages don't belong to the train experience. It's from a separate company, because that's how they got that's why they got the insurance payout on Lily's death. Because even if the carriages were owned by Alistair's company, paying out insurance to Agatha wouldn't have helped him. Anyway, that's a different matter. My point being, Lily had the books, presented them to Alistair. He was like, no, you can't tell anyone. Like, this would ruin the business. You know, it's founded on like a bunch of illegal activity. It would, you know, our stock prices would plummet, etc., etc. He doesn't take the ledgers off her. Somehow they end up back in the trunk. Still not clear why the trunk was on the train 5 years ago. And they're not just back in the trunk, but the trunk is locked again. So why would Lily put them back in the trunk? Because if it was 5 years ago that they were being given to a museum, then Alistair's had the intervening 5 years to break into a trunk, which, yes, it's a very old steamer trunk, but it's not like, why have you not sorted this out in the 5 intervening years? Like, this is very compromising material. Remove it from public access. Anyway, the story is a bit weak at this point, I feel. But yes, anyway, they're back in the trunk. The trunk's on the train. He's trying to break into it. It doesn't actually say whether he succeeded or not 2 nights ago. But anyway, at the events 5 years ago, so he pleaded with her, he offered her money, but she wouldn't listen. And it was all very stressful. Even up to the night of her death, he was trying to get her to give him the ledgers. So he admits all that to Ezra. And then later on in the lounge car, Agatha runs another one of her cruel games. They seem to have finished the main murder mystery, but I don't know who killed Lord Pemberton. They haven't actually said what the resolution of this game that they're all playing was. But anyway, Agatha's moved on to doing like little standalone games now. One was the writing prompt, and this is they're just playing stock market, basically. So they're all given cards with companies on them, and then they buy their shares, and then throughout the day Agatha is revealing events which would affect stock prices. And of course she's doing her like psychological torture of like, one of the pieces of information she reveals is that a famous shipping company has been fallen into disrepute because it turned out its founder was a criminal. And so Alistair obviously is about to have a mental breakdown. So the game ends, And the chapter ends with Alistair's wife Cordelia meeting Ezra in the library car. And she's not been in the story very much up until now, but she says to Ezra, you know, I know that Alistair has told you the whole truth. She wants to reassure him, my husband is a fool. He's a weak man who has made a series of very foolish, very desperate decisions, but he's not a killer. And she says that Alistair followed Lily onto the observation deck on the night of her death, and it again was trying to plead with her, try and like give her money to give him the ledgers, but she still refused. And according to his wife, Alistair just left it at that. He left defeated, gave up, but that was the last time anyone saw Lily alive. But she's insisting that he didn't kill her. She just says, he came back to our room a broken man. She says it's not guilt that's been haunting him, it's the terrible crushing knowledge that if he had stayed with her, she might still be alive. He's a weak man, a desperate man, a criminal even, but he's not a monster. And then it's the puzzle for the day. So my new suspect is actually Cordelia herself. Would you agree with me? My theory is that, I mean, Alistair and Cordelia clearly talk to each other a lot and are very open about their problems. So I think Alistair told Cordelia about Lily finding the ledgers, and he's desperate and frazzled and she won't accept the money. And so Cordelia takes matters into her own hands and pushes Lily down the stairs or wherever it happened. And then she takes the ledgers from Lily's room and puts them back in the trunk and locks it all up. Essentially, she's just trying to reset things back to how they were. I'm not sure why she wouldn't keep the ledgers, but that's all I can think is like she's put them back so that if that trunk is ever investigated, nobody knows that Lily found them in the first place. Because obviously she has as much invested in this family business as Alistair does, and doesn't want his reputation ruined and his name tarnished and all that, because it's also her name. And then I think, well, I've got two kind of little points. One, I think Alistair knows that Cordelia did it, because when he found the body, maybe there was something which indicated Cordelia's guilt, either a physical object or it could be something ephemeral, like the scent of her perfume was in the air. And so that's why Alistair is having such a nervous breakdown and acting so strange, because he's trying to cover for his wife. And maybe he took something from the scene when he found Lily's body, or there was that whole thing with like somebody had been in Imogen's room and Alistair acted really strangely, like saying it was him, and it didn't really make sense. But if he thinks Cordelia was in Imogen's room, then he was trying to cover for her. I know this doesn't quite explain all the trunk going back and forth, but I haven't quite got that bit to make sense in my mind. The second thing I wondered was, they said that when Lily's body was found, her manuscript pages were all around. If I was investigating this crime, I would want to know, was that definitely her manuscript pages, or was it pages from the ledgers? And I would want to look at that manuscript, because we've already had two characters in this story taking real life events and using them in their art, in their writing. So we've had Dashiell kind of fictionalizing what's going on in the present day, and we've had Agatha using people's personal backstories to like create little games or elements to the murder mystery game. She's doing it to wind them up, but this is a recurring pattern. So what I would want to know, if I could read Lily's manuscript, would be, did she take the Kingsley problems and put them in the manuscript, fictionalize them? Because if those pages were fluttering around her, like, who collected them up? What's happened to them? Where have they gone? Has anybody checked what they actually were? Or maybe the ledger pages were in with the manuscript, and that's what Alistair has possibly removed from the scene of the crime. Because I don't see why Lily would have put the ledgers back in the trunk and locked it. That's not in her interests. Even if she changed her mind and was going to accept the Kingsley money, she wouldn't put them back in the trunk. Yeah, this whole thing about ledgers in the trunk is a bit strange. I haven't got it quite to make sense in my head. The timeline of where the trunk was on the different trains, and what happened in the intervening 5 years that these ledgers weren't sorted out. That's my current theory. And it's definitely stronger than the Imogen theory, but I haven't completely given up on that. Just want to note, technically we're halfway through now, the end of day 12, but we've definitely got less than half of the book to go. The chapters are getting shorter. So whilst if I was reading this as a normal story, I wouldn't necessarily expect to have such a strong idea about the whodunit at the halfway point. But because we've got, I'd say, about a third of the book to go, and the chapters are shorter than they were initially, I feel like there isn't actually all that much story left, but it's really hard to judge in this like tiny piecemeal portions. At the end of the puzzle for today, it does have a note to the reader saying, do you think you know who the killer is? Write it down and find it out if you're around Christmas Eve. So there's been enough that I think we're supposed to be able to guess. Anyway, on to the puzzle for the day. So I've already had a look at it before filming. It's weird. You know, it's funny, I was complaining yesterday the puzzles haven't got harder. This one is much harder, at least for me. I haven't initially had any great ideas, other than the number 11 must probably represent A. Just running through my bad ideas, I thought maybe you subtract 10 from all of the numbers and that would give you the number for the alphabet, but nope, because 54, there's no 44th letter. I then considered whether it was the first digit, like only the first digit there was the letter number, or only the second digit, but those don't really work because you would then be expecting 3-digit numbers in the sequence. The entire word's not going to be made up of the letters A, B, C, D, E. There's nothing higher than a 5 in any of these single digits. No 6s or 7s or anything like that. See, I'm a bit stumped. Before I look at the hints from the actual book itself, I am just gonna have just a quick Google about codes that use numbers to represent letters. So yes, the obvious one, A equals 1, B equals 2. Could be ASCII codes, could be the T telephone pad layout. Again, I don't think it's a telephone layout because you'd expect numbers higher than 5. Alphine cipher, never heard of that one. That looks a bit complex. Let's have a look at our favourite decryption website. Morse code, Enigma, Caesar. Is it Affine? Ray or fence cipher? I wonder what that involves. I'm looking for one involving numbers. What's Polybius? Polybius? I'm going to go Polybius. Polybius square ciphers. What's that? Let's Google. What is Polybius? It's a substitution cipher that uses a grid or Polybius square to represent letters with a pair of coordinates. These numbers are all pairs. To encrypt, you find a letter in the grid and replace it with a row and column numbers. It's like a battleship kind of situation. Although if I was using rows and columns, they'd all be like B5, D7, that kind of. Since the modern English alphabet is 26 letters, it's typically arranged in a 5x5 grid where I and J share a cell. 1 through 5. Okay, well, the Wikipedia article's got Greek letters, not Latin, but let's have a look. Give it to me in Latin, not Greek. Okay, with the Latin alphabet, this is the typical form. So if this is correct, then 3-1 would be L. L, E, G, leg, A, C, Y. What did I just spell? Legacy? And then I or J, probably I, is A. Oh, is it going to be lie? Yeah, lie. Legacy is a lie. But we already know that. Okay. Oh, that was quite good. I've never heard of a Polybius square, as you can tell from my pronunciation. Why is the puzzle just reinforcing something we already know? Is this, again, my theory of like, you don't actually have to solve the puzzles? Wasn't one of the other puzzles about the trunk? Why are okay, the puzzle from 2 days ago said check the trunk. So presumably that's instructing Ezra. And now we're being told legacy is a lie. Maybe it's not the ledgers inside of the trunk. Maybe it's something else. The morbid part of my brain thinks maybe it's a dead body. Because it's not going to be Sebastian's. Oh, that would be grim. I don't think this book is that dark, because that would be the lie, is that Alistair's legacy is in the trunk, and maybe it's actually something else. Eee. Okay, that's the end of part 2 of this series. So we've done days 7 to 12. I don't think I have anything more to add. I think you are up to speed with my thinking, whether you agree with me or not, whether you think I've gone bananas, whether you think I'm a terrible detective. Fair enough, fair enough. If you have any theories, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to know if you've gone a completely different thought process from me, because you could be totally right. I could be way off base.